Welcome to the Jesus Took Naps podcast, where we learn to embrace the remarkably ordinary life of Jesus on our daily journey. Join us as we talk about life and faith, navigate our own relationships with God, and grow in friendship with each other. We will engage questions about the church and the cultural context of our day as we challenge assumptions and grow in our faith together.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Jesus Took Naps, a remarkably ordinary podcast. I love saying that, so I'm going to say it as often as I can. It is one of my favorite things
It's
about
a fun
our
phrase.
podcast.
Yeah,
It
it's
is a
good.
fun phrase. And I am Victor Scott, and I am here with my good friend.
Drew Anderson.
We are your co-host, co-journey peoples along this journey. I said journey too many times there.
That's all right. They're a
But
good band.
these are our special kind of bonus episodes that we have put together. And I blame Drew every step of the way for these episodes, but
You
I
like
have
that.
enjoyed myself as we've put them together. And these are our Meme-ology episodes. Now,
Yes.
a Meme-ology episode is where we look at memes in the Christian space and we ask ourselves some questions about how we feel about them.
Mhm.
In particular, I coined this particular phrase, I think, and if not,
You did.
I apologize, and we'll give due credit to anyone else who did come up with it, is the memosity of the meme. How memey is the meme? And so today we're going to talk about another meme, and this one is particularly interesting because it deals with probably one of the most interesting moments in Jesus' ministry
Yeah.
because of how public it was.
Yeah.
And it's the moment where Jesus turned tables. And in recent days, weeks, and years even, people have liked to use this as an opportunity, an excuse to do something
Yeah.
that they
Usually
feel that
say
they should do.
something. Usually
Say
say something.
something.
That's
Say
right.
something.
A
You usually
license to
don't do
say
something.
something. That's right.
Correct. And so this is what the meme looks like. And we're going to post it up for those of you that are watching the meme. The meme goes like this. Me, quotations or little asterisks, loses all money in Monopoly. Also me. It's okay. What would Jesus do? Me. Jesus flipping tables.
That's right.
It is hilarious. So,
It's
Drew,
really funny.
what is your there's several things that we're looking at, right? What are the criteria? You need to remind me. I always forget. What are
That's
the three
right.
kind of things we're looking at?
Does it get your attention? That's number one.
Get your attention. Okay.
Is it funny? Is there good humor? And then does it make you think? Does it actually make you think about what it's talking about? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Is it funny?
It's hilarious. First of all, it's hilarious just because Monopoly. All right. If you've ever played Monopoly, and you've ever gotten into it, and I am guilty, 1,000%, not just playing it, but when I play it, like I'm in it to win it. Like I'm cutthroat. I have kids now and I'm still cutthroat. Like it takes everything in me.
You can't let your kids win, man.
It takes
I don't
everything
believe
in
in
me
that.
to not let my kids win, to actually let my kids win.
Nope.
Everything in me. And but so I'm serious about Monopoly. And so this idea that like when you finally are done, like when someone finally takes you out, yeah, I get it. The idea that I'm just gonna flip the board. Everyone's gonna lose their money in their spots and forget what they had. Game
Did
is
you notice
over.
that there's a Monopoly board in the meme?
Oh yeah, they did a great job.
Yeah, it's got cards and money
That's
and
right.
the whole Monopoly
That's right.
board, and Jesus just flipping that sucker over.
Great job. The only way better is if they had like the character, one of the characters, like the car, or just flying over the guy's head. But anyways, it's hilarious. It's funny. It's funny.
I think it's funny because it's kind of trite, and you're like, would Jesus really be interested in this? Right? You're taking one of the most like significant moments in Jesus' ministry, where it says,
"That's right.
Have you made my Father's house a den of whatever thieves and all kinds of stuff?"
Right.
Oh God, I just made a boo-boo and forgot the reference. Whatever. Anyways, everybody knows what I'm talking about. And here's Jesus just flipping the tables, and you're like, I think Jesus would spend his time just a little bit better. So, is it funny? The other one, did it make you think?
Yeah, of course, it made you think. I mean, obviously, it makes you think about Monopoly and your time playing Monopoly and how you get frustrated when you lose and all that kind of stuff. But it caused you to think about Jesus flipping tables. because the reference here is, while humorous, it's saying, hey, in the realm of possibilities, because we've seen this
Mm-hmm.
posted a lot recently, in the realm of possibilities of how Jesus may react to a situation, you have to include flipping tables. And that is true. It is actually true.
Mm-hmm.
It is a possibility. He did it. He flipped tables. The context of him flipping tables, the reason why he flipped tables, the fact that he only did it once and he did it at the very end when it was
Mm-hmm.
meant to spark some sort of public outrage. I mean, all of that needs to be taken into context.
Yeah,
But they aren't
for sure.
wrong. And so the idea that you could apply Jesus flipping tables to losing Monopoly is funny, but it does make you think about the instance where Jesus flipped tables. So, Victor, what about that instance when you think about Jesus flipping tables and that moment in
Yeah.
Jesus's ministry? How do you understand it? How do you reconcile it with a picture of a Jesus who is, for all intents and purposes, in his first time around coming to Earth, because we know he's coming back again, but for his
Mm-hmm.
first time around coming to Earth, he was a pacifist. He was not aggressive. He did not do anything aggressive, as far as we know, up until this point. So how do you wrap your mind around it?
I think the contrast, I think the way you framed that is really good, because the contrast between what Jesus came to embody and represent in his earthly ministry when he first, and he initially comes in, is going to look very different from the way he comes his second time around, right?
That's the
Because
picture we get, right?
the
Yeah.
image is of a conquering king, the image is of a victorious warrior. He's coming back to finish what he started, but what he started
Mhm.
and the way he started it was very different. And I think two thoughts came to mind when you asked me the question, because
Hmm.
again, a lot of times we're reacting to these kind of cold, so we're not really
Yeah, that's right.
pre-thinking, which is probably not a good way to run a show, but that's
This is
just
how
the way
we're
we
ruining
just,
our Meme-ology episodes.
yeah,
Okay,
this is just our
yeah.
kind of gut level reactions to these things.
That's
The
right.
two things that came to mind was, how important was what was happening in the temple to Jesus? Just
Hmm.
how important was it to him that
Hmm.
that was his emotional reaction
That's right.
to
That
what
he
he
had not
saw?
had that type of reaction up until this point on Earth
Correct.
this time.
What he saw there was so egregious to Jesus, it literally required a reaction that brought to light everything that was going on. So that's the first thing. How important was it to Jesus? Apparently, it was extremely important.
Hmm.
The second thing is, we have so many assumptions about what being I'm going to use the word nonviolent looks like, that we
Hmm.
misunderstand that what God is calling us to is a not engaging in vengeance,
Hmm.
right? God says that vengeance is his, that the prerogative or the right to judge belongs to God. But what Jesus was doing was not judging, right? He was clearing out, right? He was cleaning something, and it looked like judgment to everybody around him, but it really wasn't judgment. His reaction, at least in my mind, and again, I could be wrong on that, but it's just, when I think about it, I think about it in the same way that I would think about if my child, when they were much smaller, ran between two cars, right? The example that we used, if your child ran between two cars and you saw an oncoming car, you would be angry, right? Your reaction, that would be an angry reaction, but not because you're angry at the child, but because you know what could have happened if you didn't respond aggressively, right? That's not judgment.
Yeah.
That is your body, your
It's
mind, your
loving
soul, your
anger.
spirit doing something in such an aggressive way, right? And even when you're done and you're calming yourself down from that adrenaline rush, you feel angry. You're like,
Mhm.
why did you do that? But you're not like angry at the kid. You're angry
Mhm.
at the situation. The
That's right.
situation was so bad
That's right.
that you had to do something about it.
That's
And
right.
so those are the two things that come to mind.
Yeah.
How important was this to Jesus? It was
Mhm.
unbelievably important to him.
Mhm.
But the other thing is that he said the reaction I need to have needs to match how important this is.
Yeah.
And that's an important lesson, I
Yeah.
think. And it's something, I don't know if I've ever really kind of put it in that framework, but because of the meme and how kind of trivial the meme makes the action, you're like, no, 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 no. This is a much more important thing on the
Yeah.
serious side of the conversation
Yeah.
than we're really giving it.
Yeah. I agree. And I think then in the way it gets applied in culture, as we think about that, and
Mm-hmm.
how often it's been referenced in just the last couple of years, especially the last year, is that I struggle with how most people reference it. And It's partly because of what you were saying about the seriousness of the situation. It's partly
Mm-hmm.
because this was one very specific situation that Jesus took this serious enough to do this. There were plenty of other situations that were
Oh
serious
yeah.
to Jesus that he does not react in this way. So we have to ask ourselves why. Why didn't he react to there's no doubt he saw brutality happen between a Roman guard or official and a Jewish person. There's no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
It happened all the time. We never heard, we never have a story of him reacting in this sort of way towards that Roman guard. Like that, to us, that would be almost culturally offensive. Like, why didn't you do something about that, Jesus? Likely he saw something like that happen and he did not react in this way. He probably reacted, but we have no evidence that he reacted in this way.
Mm-hmm.
So why is this so important when some of these other cultural issues potentially were not, right? Why didn't he react this way to other issues that could have made him this angry, but he did not react in the same way?
Man.
And so I think we've got to be very careful in applying this beyond its instance, right? When we have a passage in scripture,
Yeah.
this is true of all biblical interpretation. When you have a passage in scripture that seems to be pretty unique, like there's not multiple instances of it.
It's out of character.
It's out of character in some
Yeah,
sense.
that
Or
it
it's
just feels out of character.
that's right. And that is true for the whole Bible, not just for Jesus. Then you
Mm-hmm.
probably should not make that thing a principle by which you then, live by, right? It's a uniquely understood situation that's based on another principle, something else that you need to figure out what the principle is. But that in and of itself is probably not a principle worth applying over and over and over again. And I would consider this to be that the story
I
of
would agree.
Jesus flipping tables,
Yeah.
like, I think there's an underlying principle we need to get at, but the flipping tables itself, applying that to situations that we're dealing with today, I struggle. Now, where I do think it probably rightly applies is how people have misused the church in abusive ways. And we've had some of those stories show up recently, right? Abuse that's happening in a church setting. That could be the closest thing to me saying, okay, that applies, because that's what he's dealing with. He's dealing with the abuse of his house. And
Right.
and how that then causes this is a word that you and your father use a lot, spiritual injuries. It causes problems for people in their relationship with God. And so
I think that's the
rightfully
principle.
God should be angry.
Yeah, you got there. I think that's when you started talking and describing that, I think that's the thing. What was it about the entire situation that got Jesus to the point where he said, no, this has to, not only does this have to stop, it has to stop right now.
Yeah.
Right. Because that's kind of what we're talking about. And I think what you were saying is where I was going to in my mind is anything that hinders our ability to worship God in a way that reflects who he actually is. Right. Because what was happening is that by selling in the courtyard there, they were basically saying that your relationship with God is transactional and not relational. It's transactional. That if you give God these sacrifices, God is now obligated to give you whatever it is you think that you are supposed to get in return. But what God desires is a contrite heart. What God desires is a humble spirit. What God desires is for us to approach him as sons and daughters, right? And sons and daughters are not supposed to, hopefully, in a healthy situation, manipulate their parents through, compliance necessarily. Now, there are moments where we, as parents, those of us that are parents, we want our kids to comply because we know that they'll learn something. But that is not a transactional relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Or on the other side of that coin, not feel like that they have to be manipulated, like this obligatory thing that, like, I have to go exchange this money in order to get this sacrifice in order to please an
Mm-hmm.
angry God or something. It's
Mm-hmm.
the same idea. It's just the other side of the coin that, like,
Yep.
God's manipulating me in some sense so that I will do this thing so that I'm in right standing with God. No, that's not what this is about. And so I think actually, because you get Jesus teaching about if someone causes a child to stumble, that it would be
Mm-hmm.
better for them to, like, tie a millstone to their neck and jump in the water. I mean, like, that's really bad, y'all. Like, he's pretty serious about that. I think this is the display of that teaching.
Right. That's a verbal example.
That's a
of this
verbal
physical.
example. of this physical thing that he did,
Expression,
where
yeah.
he was saying, "You were keeping my children from me
Mhm.
through what you're doing. I'm angry." Like,
And it's
yeah,
it's not just keeping. You were
yeah,
actually distorting
d-
and
yes,
manipulating their
yes,
understanding of who I
of who I
am
am. Yeah,
to such a degree that they can't even approach me or relate to me in a way that is the way that I
that
want.
that I designed. Yeah.
Correct. And so
So
this issue,
yeah.
it's interesting that the context of worship is so prevalent in what's happening here.
Hmm.
Right. And I think worship sometimes we think of it as singing or,
Yeah.
movement or
Yeah.
whatever. But I think probably a good synonym is that worship is relationship.
Yeah.
Right? Worship is relationship. What kind of worship, what kind of relationship are we having with God?
Hmm.
And if that worship, if that relationship is based on transactionalism, where a tit for tat, or you do this and I do that, and we're reciprocating back and forth, then what's going to end up happening is that we're really not going to have the kind of depth in our relationship with God that both God desires, but we require in order for us to become fully and fully actualized as people
Yeah.
in God's image.
For
And
sure.
so, yeah, man,
Yeah.
this meme has definitely got me thinking. I had not really thought of some of these things until we
Well,
started considering
I
it.
just think it's a valuable meme in that it makes you laugh, but it also can make you
Hmm.
actually think about how this story is being used right now in our culture for
Yeah.
people to take some liberties, to say some things that are sometimes really harsh, sometimes just unnecessary,
Hmm.
or at times they may be right, like what you're saying is right, but the context in which you're saying it, the tone in which you're saying it, the way
So
in which it's
unloving.
not coming from love. That's
Yeah. So
exactly right.
unloving.
Because that's what your example about the parent getting angry because of the child going into traffic. That's this. This is Jesus in the most loving way possible getting angry. And and I think that it too often this is being used in a very surface level manner where it's not coming from a deep well of love for the other person. That now I'm flipping tables. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
tell you, I'm just going to tell you like it is. I'm going to tell you what I want to tell you. I'm using Jesus as my excuse to just tell you what I want to tell you.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's not love. And
Yeah.
so we have to be very careful if we're going to, and I'm going to use this language very intentionally. If we're going to weaponize Jesus to
Mm.
fight battles,
Come on now.
then we're no different than the people that we think we're fighting those battles against. Like we
Yeah.
have just gone to the same level as them. And but we think we're righteously doing it or doing it in some sort of spiritual way because I can reference the story where Jesus flips tables and it's like, no, all you've done is stoop to their level. You have not actually done what Jesus did. Um, and
Yeah.
and so it makes me sad. It really genuinely makes me sad more than anything when I see this being used so much as an excuse to basically react to the situation however I want to react instead of asking myself like how do I feel a deep sense of love despite the horribleness of this situation in front of me? How
Yeah.
do I make sure that this is coming from a deep place of love so that when I do it for their good, even though it's a hard thing to do. I'm doing it for their good.
The motivation of our action is critical.
Yeah.
And Jesus is exemplifying that. He is showing us that the reason he was angry was important to the action of his anger, to the manifestation and expression of his anger. The whole idea of being angry and not sinning, right?
Mm, yes,
This is the essence of it, right?
it
Jesus
is.
Jesus was explosively angry, but the reason he was explosively angry and the way in which he did it means that there's something about this event that we don't fully understand and we take advantage of in order for us to do whatever it is we think, again, what we think we should do. And
Yeah.
so we take liberties and we take license in a way with this passage and this story that doesn't always create the kind of response that I think God was interested in creating in us. And so, yeah, I
I,
think this
I
meme is
agree.
good.
I agree. Last thought I'll share though is I will say it does it does in a way say you can be angry and not sin.
Yes.
And so that is true. And I think that's okay to then acknowledge that and to say, okay, so then what does it mean for me to be angry in this moment and not sin? that's a healthy takeaway and conversation from this. And so there are things happening in our world right now that make me very angry.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay if I'm angry and not sinning. I don't need to use this story to have some sort of license to react to those things however I want to react, but it does teach me that there is a healthy way, that if I depend on the Spirit, I depend on God, I depend on Jesus to form me into his
Yes.
image, then I can begin to react in a way that is not sinning and yet expressing anger, because whatever that thing out there that is unjust that is happening is keeping people from God. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the one, for me, the takeaway here at the end is this issue of, am I in control, or am I being controlled by my anger? Jesus was expressing a righteous indignation to the situation. He was not out of control.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we can kind of err, we can get in trouble, is when we think that our anger is righteous, but if it's out of control, it can't be righteous.
Yeah.
And that feels a little strong to say it that way, but I want to say it that way for the sake of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
If we're out of control in our anger, it is very difficult to maintain a level of righteous anger, a righteousness to it. And so that would be my takeaway.
Yeah. I think that's good.
Well, I think we're going to take it to close, because otherwise this will turn into a full episode rather than just a bonus episode.
That's right. That's right.
So everybody, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of this conversation. We want to send us your memes, right? We're going to have plenty of places you can send them in our socials. You can connect with us on locals.com. It is a great place for us to just do some extra things, and we're going to start wrapping that up. You can go to our website, jesustooknaps.live. It's not .com or anything, it's .live. So we encourage you to do that. And just reach out to us with your favorite memes. We might even consider including them in what we find and what we're talking about.
That's right.
And so thank you so much for being a part of this bonus episode, and we will see you the next time.
You've been listening to Jesus Took Naps, a remarkably ordinary podcast. Make sure to like our Jesus Took Naps Facebook page and follow us on Instagram and Twitter at jesustooknaps.live. Also, go to our website, jesustooknaps.live, to sign up for our email newsletter for updates about the podcast. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.